During his, well, you go back to the congressional years, so you have
Yes.
a little broader perspective, I think, on Hugh Carey. But the basic initial question that I've asked everybody to respond to is from where you have been and where you are. What was Hugh Carey's contribution to the city, the state?
Well, the major contribution that Hugh Carey provided both city and state was leadership, which saved both the city and the state from bankruptcy. If the city had gone under in 1975, the state would not have been far behind. And I believe that he mastered the facts immediately and mastered the solutions quite shortly thereafter, and marshaled the people in the city and in the state legislature to do what had to be done. If he had not been there, and if there had been someone with less ability, he has great intelligence, he has great integrity, he is a person who I admire, like, and will always think of as one of the great governors of the state of New York. If he had not been there, we would have been in a lot of trouble, perhaps to the point of no return.
Where do you see him in historical perspective, as we can appreciate it now? You know, maybe we're making things up, but you look at the governors in the 20th century, from Teddy Roosevelt at the turn of the century up through. Where do you think his place, or what will be special about his place? Well,
I'm not an historian, and I haven't evaluated other governors to the point where I could give you a perspective evaluating one against the other. But I believe that history will record Hugh Carey as one of the great governors of the state of New York, because of the contribution that he made in terms of leadership, in terms of making it possible for others to do their duty. He stood up and said, this is what had to be done, and he got others to stand with him. Now, when you do these things, when you are a leader and you have to tell people, as he did when he was first elected, that the time of wine and roses is over. That's what he said, and he was right. Then you're going to get people a little angry with you, because everybody has the feeling they want more. And it's very tough to stand up and say, you're right. If we had more to give, we would give it, but we don't. And I, governor of the state of New York, have to tell you the truth. And he told the truth.
Let's go 5 years down the road and whatever you may be doing at that time. Hugh Carey's name comes up.
5 years down the road, I'll be here at City Hall.
Good for you. Sitting in City Hall, and Hugh Carey's name comes up either in conversation or an item in the paper or something like that. What's the first sort of remembrance that will percolate to the surface?
That he was a person who was unpredictable in terms of mood. I mean, I've seen him at his best, and I've seen him at his worst. His best, there are none better in terms of an ability to get you to do what has to be done and to get you to like it. I think the Irish have a special feel about that. They make among the best, if not the best, political leaders because of that special Irish quality. But there is another Irish quality, which is referred to, I don't know whether rightly or wrongly, as Black Irish, who are on occasion moody. That's when I would say he's at his worst, but even at his worst, he's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Okay.
Ed Koch's favorite story about Hugh Carey.
Well, when we had the convention here, 1980, the presidential convention, so Hugh Carey, as you may recall, wanted an open convention instead of having the delegates bound as they were under the convention rules. And of course, President Carter did not want that, and most of the delegates there were for President Carter. And I remember Hugh Carey and myself coming to Radio City Music Hall to welcome the delegates. And I don't know, maybe there were 5,000 people, delegates and family and friends, all in that hall. And for whatever reason that moved him at the time, instead of just stopping after he welcomed them, he began to explain why it was that he was for an open convention and urging them to support a motion to open the convention. Well, of course, this was absolutely nuts, since every one of them was for a closed convention, and he was spitting in the wind. And they began to boo. And I'm on the stage with him, and I'm saying to myself, how in the hell is he going to get out of this? And you know what he did? He began to sing. And he has a wonderful Irish, I don't know whether it's baritone tenor, I think, tenor probably. And the whole crowd began to sing with him. And then he said, and the mayor is going to sing. I can't sing, but I sang along just because he asked, and he got the whole crowd with him on that. And what he did was to turn what might have been a very ugly situation into a very lovely one.
Could you just count to 10?
Pardon me?
Could you just tell me your name and address?
Some level.
Robert Morgado, 75 Rock Center.
Great. Okay.
You rolling?
I'm rolling.
Okay. A question that may be easy to answer, but probably is difficult. From your experience in the Carey years, and now just briefly removed, give us your kernel of truth, your nugget of truth about Hugh Carey's contribution to the people, and the people of the state of New York, and the state, you know, the Empire State.
The governor's overall, when the history is written relative to his administration, it is inevitable that that history will have to focus and emphasize very heavily his financial management of the state during its darkest hour. It's very easy for us now, with 8 years removed, to forget those very dark days in 1975. The governor took office at a time when the city in New York actually peered into that darkness of whether, in fact, it would survive as a financially solvent part of our fabric, when our own state agencies, the construction authorities, also teetered at the edge of insolvency, when the city of Yonkers, the city of Buffalo, did not know whether it would be able to meet their next payrolls. This is the time that he took office. It was also a time when our country came out of a 2-year recession, which up until then was really the most severe recession nationally that our country and our state went through since the Great Depression.
What principal qualities did he bring to that situation?
I think what he brought was a single-minded determination. Again, we forget, but there were many people at that time that counseled to the contrary. Cut it off. Let it go. Chapter 11 for the city. Do not put up those funds to rescue the authorities. Cut your losses. Remember that historic headline of the New York Daily News, when our own national government said to the city in New York to drop dead. Surely dramatic, but what is missed, that it echoed really sentiments by a large number of our officials, both inside and outside of government, who did not think it possible to make the match between the numbers and the reality of the present situation. But the governor his close advisors, determinedly kept at it, finding a bit of a solution here today, another increment there tomorrow. And it was a patchwork, no question. But it was that determination that said, as long as we keep filling in the pieces and keep living for tomorrow, we would ultimately build that constituency that would agree with us that this was worth doing. Obviously it was. Not only did the city survive and the state survive and its agencies return to soundness, but most importantly, the fact is what happened was the state was renewed. It was given a new spirit, a new belief in itself, an entirely different set of economic principles which underpin our government, and in fact are the guiding lights of how we act today as a government and as a society. Its roots really were in that 1975 period, at a time when and he was the proverbial captain of the ship, steering the rudder, trying to turn it around in the ocean at its darkest, in that darkest night in the storm, and looking for that brighter day. And he did it. And it's, I think what is instructive is his the personality of the man, which continues to shine through in lots of other things that I think give rise to how one interprets his administration. Perhaps critics would look at the downsides of that personality, but that personality was bullish. That personality was single-minded, uncompromising, and it's at our worst times the best traits, and our better times was interpreted to mean inability to negotiate, inability to compromise. But the sum total of it, I'll take the former, because I think so much of our public life today is in fact determined by a certain amount of mushiness. If anything, Hugh Carey was never mushy.
Your relationship with him was very close and over a long period of time. Is there any way that you can sort of talk to the essence of that relationship and to Hugh Carey, the man who occupied the governor's chair?
You know, I've said many times since my resignation as his secretary that one of the most important things to me over those years, to me personally that is, not the substance of what we were all about, obviously that has its own definition and its own importance, but what was important to me is really that sense that I could operate effectively because of a certain amount of dependability, that he understood the essence of the management of government, that it could not be a quality where the people who are on the firing line are constantly have their legs cut out from under them. I never ever felt that alone. That if in fact I was out there alone, taking or the lightning rod approach, that he understood that at periods when I personally took a lot of shocks. He was very consoling. It's not every day that a secretary to the governor is in a bruising battle with a mayor of its most principal city. And during that entire period, he understood that the role I was playing in staunch defense of his government had to, in turn, be defended. And that's really what I meant by dependability.
Mm-hmm. How are we doing on time?
16.
Uh, Well, the question I described to you, down the road still more years.
Right.
And the Carey Years experience moves away from your more present activity. And his name comes up in conversation, or, shows up in a newspaper story, and the memory bank is sort of rekindled, and something pops out. Can you pick one thing that speaks to the essence of Hugh Carey that you've talked about? But is there a particular experience you remember?
Yeah, I think so. In spite of it all, in spite of what's seemed to be my focus, and as I talked about our relationship or our experience as a government, the things that are enduring ultimately are personal, and you set aside the gloom and you remember really the man. And I absolutely am convinced that 5 years from now I'll remember him as Hugh Carey singing New York, New York. Lighthearted, but at the same time really having a true love for this state as captured in that song. And whether it's the Harvest of Music Festival, the sitting at the piano with Mrs. Powell, the fact is his spirit, I think, is best captured in song. And I don't think I'll ever hear the song New York, New York without thinking about Hugh Carey.
That's nice. That's nice.